Double exposures, multi-exposures. I've done a fair bit of this in my film photography, but not as much really on any of my digital cameras. A little bit, but not that much. I suppose there are a few reasons for that. Some film cameras, either by accident or design, are just fantastic tools for this approach. On my Mamiya, for example, it's as simple as flipping a switch, not advancing the film, and then just shooting a second frame. But it varies with other film cameras, the ease and intuitiveness of setting that up. But long exposures like this, shutter dragging, intentional camera movement, I've been doing that stuff as long as I've been camera-ing. When I was a wedding photographer trainee, the first shots I took that still hold up, look okay today, that don't embarrass me, were long exposures with movement. That was the one thing I had to offer over my much more experienced co-workers. I had just already done a ton of that type of shooting. Multi-exposures are harder for me than shutter dragging. My hit rate for intentionally moving the camera is not too bad, but for multi-exposures it's considerably lower. But I love doing it anyway, in spite of this, maybe even because of this. But I struggle to get anything good. I try not to overthink it, but sometimes I end up underthinking it, and I have to remind myself, like, come on, you can't just literally shoot anything. You have to be going for something. My cat just left. Too bad. I was hoping she'd record this whole thing with me. So the conversation I was having with myself this day would go something like this. Just think shadows, think highlights. Shadows are where the second exposure will show through, while highlights are kind of your boundaries, or like where you can define shapes, which is also a pretty solid approach for black and white photography. But it didn't even really occur to me to flip my camera over to black and white. But looking at them after the fact, it was very apparent to me that I was shooting in a black and white kind of mindset. So I converted them in post. Also added some grain in Dehancer. I usually shoot JPEG straight out of camera, but not always, not 100% of the time. Just most of the time. Thankfully, my R5 allows for in-camera multi-exposures, because none of the DSLRs I've ever owned do. Some do, just not any of mine. When I bought the R5, I was also looking at popular camera models from other brands, but they didn't have the ability to shoot multi-exposures in camera. I'm not saying I chose on that one criteria alone, but I noticed. Here I'm combining both techniques. Not too shabby. I like it. I have mixed feelings about the ghost image overlay. I haven't figured out a way to disable that. It is helpful. I just don't want to take away the uncertainty, the part where I don't quite know what I'm really getting, where I have to guess. That's part of the fun. But even with the overlay, there's still a lot of uncertainty. Because what it doesn't show is how the exposures will actually blend. The final image exposed twice, meaning you have to underexpose each shot by at least a stop, same as you would on film, ends up looking different from what you see with the ghost image. If you're doing more than 2 exposures, you have to compensate even further. So there's still some mystery, still some discovery. It's just a tool to help with alignment, and from that perspective, I'm okay with it. I find that the more I shoot intentionally out of focus, the easier it is to get something that kind of works. Multi-exposing images with clear, sharp edges is a lot tougher. And doing one of each is kind of a nice middle ground. I took a break to fly my drone because it makes me happy, but also because I had to sell my drone. My buddy, my partner, that I crashed on this very mountain last summer and spent parts of 3 days recovering, unfortunately no longer belongs to me. Tomorrow it gets boxed up, shipped out. Breaks my heart, crushes my soul. But that's the way things go sometimes. Nothing I've ever done has brought me joy, quite like flying this drone, exploring the mountains with it. I initially thought I'd film myself with it, that's why I bought it. Then I found I just wanted to take photos with it. I kinda sucked though at drone photography. Occasionally I'd get something good. Ultimately I just started exploring with it, letting go of the photography angle. And let me tell you, hot damn, is that a lot of fun. When we recover financially after this huge hit we've taken, paying for care for elderly parents, my surgery bills. I'm absolutely going to get a drone again, without question. I adored every moment spent with my DJI Mini 4 Pro. This is the next morning. Mornings have been miserably cold lately. This area is only minutes from my apartment, but I completely forgot that it exists. Haven't stopped here in years. But I was struggling to get into the multi-exposure thing this morning. I don't know what switch got flipped in my brain. It was weird. Which is not to say I didn't ultimately end up having fun, or that I didn't ultimately end up with a few shots that I like, but it felt more like a burden than a freedom, so I did end up taking some normal shots as well. But there was this initial excitement about remembering this forgotten spot, but that was quickly replaced by disappointment, because it looks exactly like every other spot around here. Seems like I can't find a single thing to photograph that I haven't already photographed 1,000 times. Can't think of a single new approach to make it more exciting for myself. I've used my entire bag of tricks. I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling uninspired. Traveling is, unfortunately, not really an option for me. I wish. But in a weird way, making videos about photography has been more fulfilling than the photography itself lately. I'm not a huge fan of this reversal. I would prefer it be flipped back, but at least something is fulfilling. But there's an underlying truth that I know all too well, that if you want to stay interested, then you've got to do something interesting. And that's the real challenge, I think. Because after a while, every place, every camera, every technique kind of just seems bland. You run out of new ideas, new ways of seeing things, whatever. Instead of excitement, you feel a kind of numbness. As though I've already squeezed every last drop out of this damned place. This lens, this camera, this genre. Some days you're gonna walk away with nothing. Some days you'll get a little something. Nothing to get particularly excited about. And then some days, for reasons you can't quite explain, everything just clicks. And I think that's just the cycle of it. I was so excited to get started doing some abstract shooting the other day. Then anxiety kind of spoiled it. I found it difficult to even get out the door. But I did eventually, and then the next challenge, the concept itself, was not quite as easy to execute well as it had been in my brain. So there was the initial excitement of the idea, then the reality of being me kind of got in the way right from the start. I feel like I'm playing out of my league. So there's the dulling of that excitement and then the frustration that follows, which all ultimately devolves into blame. I'm blaming the place I live. I'm blaming the options available. Eventually I'm blaming myself. I guess I just suck. I'm a shitty photographer. And not wrongly either. This makes it all the more difficult. I'm correct in where I'm placing the blame. I mean, I might be taking it to an extreme, but these are valid concerns. But am I going to let that be the last word on the subject, is the question. Will I give up? Or will I just view it as a challenge? The human being I aspire to be, the photographer I aspire to be, how would that person handle it? Quite simply, I think they would have the fortitude to keep working at it. At least attempt to turn the situation around. Well, I could do that. Being that person at this particular moment is within my grasp. The more talented version of myself that exists in my imagination would pull something interesting out of the monotony, something I didn't see. I mean, my two options become pretty clear once I've made this realization. I can quit and go home and cry about it, or I can look a little deeper, figure out what I'm missing, which isn't going to happen by itself. It's going to require work. I have regrets related to my drone. I never quite figured out what was missing in my drone photography. So I started using it in a way that felt good in the moment, in a way that kind of took the pressure off. I'll just use it to explore, have fun. And now it's gone, and I still don't know what I wasn't seeing, what I wasn't considering, what fundamental concept I never quite grasped. It's a lesson. I should never be okay with that if I actually want to do good work. And you can do good work amid the frustration when things are seemingly going wrong. You don't actually have to achieve some kind of state of creative bliss all the time, though it's nice when you can. I also like the idea that let's pretend I got some shot I'm really proud of. It's fun to know that that shot only exists because I was stubborn enough to keep going at a time when it seemed pointless. For every brilliant creative work that exists, there's a list of ingredients. Change even one of those ingredients, and the work no longer exists. So whatever you're doing and whatever you're feeling about what you're doing, it's never pointless, I guess, is the point. You just don't know what's going to come of it.